Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this press conference from the 47th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum here in snowy Davos. Welcome to everybody here in the room, and also welcome to all of you on the live stream, and of course a special welcome to everybody here on the panel. For those of you here in the room, if you made your way through the snow, it is probably hard to believe that water is a scarce resource. It is, however, and that's what we're dedicating this press conference to today. The question is access to safe water, and we have a wonderful panel of experts and people who have dedicated their life to work on that issue of access to water. Let me quickly introduce our panelists to you. To my immediate left is Dominic Waughray, who's the head of public-private partnership at the World Economic Forum and is also leading our work on climate change and water. Further down the line, we're joined by Gary White, who's the co-founder and chief executive officer of water.org. Right in the center of our panel, we're joined by Matt Damon, who's also a co-founder of water.org. On his immediate left, we're joined by Ricardo Tadeo, who's the zone president Africa of Anheuser-Busch InBev. And last but definitely not least, we're joined by Usha Rao Munari, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Water Development Partners and a longtime champion of water issues also at the forum and on its platform. So thank you very much for being here today. Dominic, give us a sense of why water is an issue that the forum feels deeply about and why we're putting this at the center of attention here in Davos.
Thank you, Jörg. Welcome, everyone. We ran some analysis with our colleague Usha Ramanari and some of you in the audience several years ago that when you look at an economy, it's a thirsty thing. Energy, food, industrialization, urbanization, these are thirsty businesses. And in fact, it's so thirsty that by 2030, if we don't change the way that we use the water, the fresh water that we have on this planet, there'll be a 40% gap, 40% gap between the water that is safely available to grow those economies and what we have. So that's a choke point, plain and simple. We are profligate with water. We don't use it wisely. Over 70% of the water we use is for agriculture. There are huge efficiency gains to be made. Energy is a very thirsty business, whether it's fossil fuel energy or others. So if you add all this up together, and we have a fast-growing global economy, particularly across emerging economies, something needs to change. That is why, in our risk report for the past 7 years, and you'll see it in the global risk report for 2017, water remains one of the top global risks that the World Economic Forum and its network of risk analysts identifies. Now, the trouble about water, or the intriguing thing about water, is it's all joined up. So in fact, that risk network is exacerbated by climate change. Climate change might create more scarcity of water because it's warmer, or it might change weather patterns. It will dump water all at once. So climate change and water become a double risk. And of course, if you're a farmer or you're poor and you are susceptible to risk and there's no water and the climate is warming, you might move. Water, climate, and migration, involuntary migration, are the 3 top global risks of the World Economic Forum's risk report for 2017. All of that against a baseline of a world where there are over 7 billion smartphones, but 2.2 billion people don't have access to an adequate toilet. Something is not right, and something needs to change to improve the economic productivity and inclusive growth of our economy. That is why the World Economic Forum is very interested in water as an issue.
Thank you, Dominic. Gary, you've obviously realized the issue early on and founded water.org. What is at the heart of the foundation and how do you see the risk? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic?
Well, I am optimistic for a few different reasons. I think when we look at why water.org, it's a slice of this global water context, and what we try to do is come at it from the perspective of people living in poverty. So there are these macro issues, and they need to be addressed from the top down, and I think that there are things happening to make that work out. But for us, it's like, what are those impediments to the poor? getting access to water and sanitation. And we want to have them have a level playing field so that when resources are developed, when infrastructure is expanded from the top down, they have a level playing field and can come into getting these water and sanitation solutions. And I'm optimistic because some of the work that we've done on the Global Agenda Council for Water has focused on these coping costs. The coping cost of people buying bottled water, even very poor people sometimes having to do that, paying water vendors, the health costs, the direct health costs in terms of going to the doctor, buying medicines, but the lost time. You add up all these coping costs, and it's about $670 billion, according to our preliminary results on this. We need to do a little bit more refinement. But those are all funds that are in the system right now that could be redirected. And what we've done is help people from the bottom up through water credit get access to microfinance so that they can get away from some of these coping costs, not pay loan sharks for funds, and then use those microloans to get improved water and sanitation. So I think that's really what we see. We see the problem itself contains its own solution in terms of the resources being there to make this happen. And I think just in wrapping up, one of the dominant themes that's emerging here certainly is income inequality. And I can't think of any greater manifestation of income inequality than people not having the money to gain access to water and sanitation. That juxtaposition of what we so much take for granted at the turn of a tap, that 663 million of us, or 2.2 billion from the sanitation perspective, don't have this basic commodity. And that's how income inequality really hits home for the majority of the world's poor.
Thank you, Gary. Matt, let's continue with you. I imagine you have a pretty tight schedule normally. So I hear from Xi Jinping this morning that you just came back from defending the Chinese wall. So, why did you throw your weight behind water? Was it beyond Gary's charm? So what was it that convinced you to work in that water field and dedicate so much time to it?
Well, I was just looking at issues of extreme poverty, and I was just so impressed by how water and sanitation underpinned absolutely everything. And nobody was talking about it. It was something in the West that we have a really hard time relating to. And so as I dug deeper and deeper, I eventually came to the, I'm trying to do this as fast as I can because I know we're on, but I eventually came to the realization that I needed to partner with the best expert I could find in the sector. And when they wouldn't take my calls, I ended up with Gary. But what I should do is just another minute on water credit. Gary kind of breezed over it, but it's an innovation that came from Gary through his time in these, through his whole adult life, kind of interacting with these communities. He basically realized that the extremely poor of the world were paying for water. They were oftentimes paying 10 times more than the middle class of their country. But the concept of water credit was essentially applying the ideas of microfinance to the water sector. And so the kind of thought leap that required for these microfinance institutions was that normally they give loans that are, income generating loans. You give me $200, and you loan me $200, I buy a sewing machine and start a sewing business and I pay back your $200. What Gary realized was people were leaving jobs, women primarily, were leaving jobs to go stand in a line and collect water at a communal collection point. And it was this terribly inefficient use of their time. And so if you actually fronted them the money to connect to the existing infrastructure in, say, an urban slum in India, where water's being piped right under their feet, they're just not connected to it, what you could essentially do is buy their time back. And so rather than wait at this communal collection point, they now have water coming directly into their house and they can work more hours at their job and pay the loan off with relative ease. And so it was really, it seems like a simple thing, but it was a pretty profound insight. And so we started piloting this, and it's worked really better than we ever could have hoped. I mean, these loans pay back at over 99%, 93% of our borrowers are women, and it's something that really can scale and is sustainable also because as these loans come back, they go out again. And so the philanthropic cost of capital per person just goes down every single time that loan gets recycled. Right now we're down in our most mature loan programs to under $5 per person to get them to get somebody clean water. So So it's been a really effective tool of ours, and we've been looking for these special corporate partnerships to kind of turbocharge our work, and that's one of the reasons we're here today to make an announcement.
Thank you very much, Matt. And it's good to see you, whereas Dominic pointed out that the risks are connected, you're also saying there's also positive spillover effects into other areas. So that's great to hear. Ricardo, Matt mentioned the corporate partnership. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with water.org and why you've chosen to do so?
It's very important to mention first that we believe that every brand needs a cause, right? Something really to stand for, to stay behind it. And for Stella Artois, which is one of the most iconic brands, beer brands in the world, where water is its most basic ingredient, it was just natural that water became that cause. And I think that our situation was more or less like Matt's situation. I mean, we studied the problem. We got into this situation when we saw that 1 out of 10 people in the world don't have access to water. And it actually was a surprise. I mean, I think awareness is something very important to drive awareness to that situation. And then I think the idea was Stella Artois could inspire people to help solving that problem. Because the other important thing to mention is that this is a solvable problem. This is not something that, I mean, it's one of these world problems that will be there forever. We can make a difference. The companies can make a difference. The consumers can make a difference. And what Stella Artois is doing is trying to be a bridge for that happening. And we are announcing here today the extension. We've been working together since 2015. So, I mean, we have helped Stella Artois and its consumers have helped more than 800,000 people have lifetime access to water. And now we are expanding for more 4 years. We have this goal to get to 3.5 million people until 2020. So it's a very important day for us. We're here. We thank a lot, Matt, for being here today with us. And we are very proud. I mean, we are launching a new line of chalices that can be purchased. In the first year, we sold about 90,000 chalices worldwide. Second year, 135%. This year, we are aiming for more than 300,000 chalices. Every year, a different set of chalices. We have chalices that are made by artists from Brazil, Cambodia, Uganda. Very nice products. So, I mean, we believe we're doing something big. We started in a relevant way, but still small. We are almost 3 times now the size we were at the beginning. And we can only think, where can we get if 5 years from now, and if we get more companies, more brands getting behind the same cause, which is something that we are inviting everyone to take part of it.
Thank you, Ricardo. And Usha, I know you're modest, but Dominic, he snitched on you and he told me that you actually have been behind many partnerships and you have a lot of experience with these concepts of collaboration. Why don't you share with us kind of what's the impact and what makes that work?
Thank you, Georg. Absolutely. I think partnerships are what is needed in the water sector. If you take a step back in water, right, and you look over the last century, it's a shocking statistic, but water use increased 3 times faster, almost, than population growth. That has resulted in the kind of statistic that Dominic quoted, where looking forward, by 2030, you're going to have a 40% deficit between demand and supply. That is a serious situation because water, as Gary and Matt have explained, is important for life, it's important for dignity, but it's also important for economic growth and corporate operations. And that's a fact that has escaped people, that, you know, water is necessary for the power sector, it's necessary for you, Ricardo, it's necessary for everybody, but somehow people have taken it for granted, assumed that it is infinite. Today, we're unfortunately facing a situation where accessible water is not infinite. And so we have to look at water as an economic good, in addition to being a fundamental life-giving good. I think partnerships are important in the water sector because they've never had them in the past. The kind of stuff you guys are doing, bringing the corporate sector in, alongside possibly governments and financiers like me, is what is going to make that difference in the water sector and create the tipping point to avoid a 40% deficit future.
Thank you, Usha. We have some time for questions, so please, we have a microphone on two sides of the room. If I get a show of hands to get a sense of who has questions. We have a gentleman here in the front and the lady in the back. So if you could state your name and organization for the sake of our online audience, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Harry Strail from Swiss Television. You teach people, sorry, my question is to Matt.
I'm surprised.
You teach people about your project also in a humor way, an immersive way. Is it important for you not to be showing the moral pointing finger?
Well, thank you for that question. We've struggled with messaging in general. We've tried a lot of different things. We tried, humor, as you say. A few years ago, I went on a toilet strike for the entire year. So we've really tried anything we can to get the message across. One of the kind of first hurdles we have to clear in the West is that it's just very hard for people to relate to this. If you grew up in Europe, if you grew up in America, you've never been thirsty in your entire life, and you've never been more than 5 meters away from a clean drink of water. The water in our toilets is cleaner than the water that 663 million people have access to. So it's really it's a hard thing for us to wrap our brains around. Whereas if you're fundraising for AIDS awareness or cancer prevention or things like this, people can relate to that because they have a family member or a friend who's been affected directly, and or they've been affected directly, and so we've really struggled, I think, with our messaging. And it's one of the reasons we're really grateful to have this partnership with Stella. They've done some really innovative things, like, for instance, not beyond the chalice sales. They've got this idea of in the UK or in America, if you walk into a bar and order a pint of Stella, you are going to provide somebody in the developing world with clean water for a month, right? Now, so that's a very direct one-to-one correlation, and that's not something that we ever would have thought of. So to be able to have that apparatus and that relationship they have with their consumers and is really important to us, and we have really high hopes for where that might go. And then on the same side, we've made this film that's gone up on the internet today, and this digital short following this one woman going on a water collection and kind of just explaining her one specific story and how her life has changed by gaining access to clean water. And they're just such good storytellers. They've done this kind of film that's less than 3 minutes. That's a completely perfect kind of digestible story that really helps kind of show the way this issue directly affects the people that it affects. So our messaging, I think, is improving with the help of people and partnerships like this, but we still have more to do, and it's constantly a give and take as we come to forums like this and interact with the press and talk to people. We're open to anybody's good ideas.
Thank you very much. Let's take the second question from the lady there in the back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florencia Angeles for W Radio Colombia. Matt Damon, thank you. How can we explain all the interest in the topics like economy, like sustainability, like migration, but the water is not only in all this agenda of leaderships? How can you convince the leadership to do something, and also if you have already the compromises or the apportation to your foundation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get the next question. Yes, please.
Well, I mean, I think I slightly disagree with your premise. I mean, I think, as Dominic pointed out, this has very much been on the agenda here for the last 7 years. And so I think there is a rising understanding of that. And look, partly that's what we do. We try to come to things like this and convene, groups like this so that we can talk about it precisely so that we can raise awareness. But I mean, our work has been going better than we ever could have hoped in that Gary's hypothesis about this microfinance play and how successful it could be was absolutely correct. And now we're just looking for ways to turbocharge that work, and I think this partnership is a great example of that.
Let's hear from the other panelists. What else is missing that we can add to do more, to raise more awareness?
I was just going to say that, I agree with Matt. There is a lot of awareness on the part of leaders. I think Dominic mentioned the Water Resources Group that the forum has backed and has sponsored over the last, 4 or 5 years. That has really brought the issue up to leaders. Today, we had a session earlier today where the prime ministers of various countries gathered to talk about how important water was as a development agenda issue for them. So I think it's getting up there alongside some of the other more popular issues, yeah.
Excuse me, could you use the microphone?
Sorry.
Because our friends on the live stream will otherwise not hear
sorry,
your question.
the last. When can we see the results of?
The results. When can you see the results?
Yes.
Well, the aim for this particular partnership is 3.5 million people by 2020. But we've, hopefully you're going to just see the results for in terms of water.org. It's ongoing. I mean, to date we've reached 5.3 million people with these solutions, and so. When we were in India a few years ago, we asked our microfinance partners to identify the biggest bottlenecks from their perspective, and what they all reported back to us uniformly was affordable access to capital. And so they felt like there was a massive demand, and we could be doing much more. So for us, it became ways we started troubleshooting. How do we deploy more loans? How do we get them the access that they need? And we came up with this idea of water equity, which was to try to tap social impact investors and start to build a fund, which we did. We did the first fund, which was $11 million, and we've deployed that. And now we're doing a second fund at 50, and we're trying to bring in big banks. We're trying to bring in high net worth individuals and people and target a 3% return. But the real impact of the investment will be obviously on the social side.
Can I add something? I also think that leaders are attracted for things that work, right? People want to see things that really work. And I think that the fact that we started at 15 with a yearly contract, reaching 800,000 people in 2 years, and now we are moving for a long-term commitment. I think that shows that we are doing something that's doing good for the brand. It's doing good for lots of people. And hopefully that example can be a model for many other brands, many other leaders to follow.
And I think, we share the vision with Stella that we can be the generation that solves this water crisis. And we need to come up with new ways of thinking about it. This is really, I think, what the partnership has been built on is the innovation of water.org. So being the organization that innovated water equity as a new approach, because we need to bring water to people today. And we're doing that through the Stella partnership. But we also have to look over the horizon, because we're realistic enough to know that even water credit isn't the solution for, the 2.5 billion people without sanitation and the 663 million without water. We need new ways of thinking about this. So we're always looking over the horizon with water.org to figure out that next innovation. And that is what's going to tie this back together with us being the generation that can end the water crisis, always looking at new partnerships, new ways of doing this. Social impact investing, as Matt mentioned, is coming on so strong now, and we feel like we're positioned to drive a lot of investment capital to this because it's such a basic solution to such a basic problem, and it's bankable. We're providing a financial return as well as a huge social return. And then to your point also about how do we bring in more people into this and how does we get more attention, we want to democratize that and create a platform this year that will allow anybody to come in and make a loan into water equity so that people can get safe water, in addition to the large-scale investors that have come in to this point for the first fund.
You're talking...
Just a second. I think Dominic wants to add something.
Just to build on that. I mean, you are welcome in here at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and you know that this is a platform for public-private cooperation, and there's not a better topic than water that illustrates the power of that collaboration, as you just heard across the panel. We have partnerships that will get us to over 500 different partners across multiple countries. You have government leaders who recognize the economic kind of weakness that poor water quality presents. And you have wonderful innovative partnerships with water.org and companies and brands like Stella, as well as many other companies and brands who are working on those partnerships. So here at the forum, this is exactly the kind of platform where you can bring together the public and the private and the civil society organizations to drive that systemic change at scale. That's what we aim to do in these few days.
Thank you. So the gentleman in the back, and
Yeah.
then the two ladies here in the front.
Yeah,
So
my name is Tobias Bosses from Swiss Television. You're talking about awareness, which increases on the leader for all these problems. But now we have a change, perhaps in the States. So, Matt Damon, what do you personally think about the presidency of Donald Trump, and could it perhaps have some changes to environmental aspects and things like that? Because the awareness of that one is not so high with him.
I can imagine there's a big interest to hear that. It's a bit of an off-topic question, so Matt, if I don't know if you...
No, it's fine. We don't know really what his relationship to foreign aid is. There was a slightly alarming article in the New York Times a couple days ago that laid out kind of the type of questions that came from his transition team to the State Department in terms of aid to Africa. That was a little worrisome. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know him. I've never met him personally. I don't know what his relationship is with the developing world. I don't know if he's been to the developing world. No, I'm serious. I mean, his interest is in high-end hotels and golf courses, and that's his business interest takes him to first world places, I think. And so I don't know how much interest or time he's really spent in the developing world engaging with these issues. And so I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. At a certain point, our work isn't dependent on the political kind of, wins, and we just have to keep doing the work that we're doing. And, President Clinton said to us a few years ago, as it was clear that our method was very successful, he said, just keep running your numbers up. Keep running your numbers up, because he was just pointing out that we just gain credibility with the more people that we're reaching. And so that's what we're here today to talk about, really, with this great partnership with Stella. And in terms of what President-elect Trump's relationship is to foreign aid, I think we're going to have to wait and see.
So time for two more questions. Gunilla, please.
Hi, my name is Gunilla von Hall. I am a Swedish journalist, Svenska Dagbladet. My question is to Mr. Damon. I'd like you to explain to me what access to things like clean water and toilets will make for the economic and social development in poor countries. And can you give me some concrete examples of concrete changes that your work has led to in these countries?
So the very first person that I ever went on a water collection with, this is 10 years ago, I was in rural Zambia, and this girl was about 14 years old, and we walked together. I was waiting for her when she came home from school, and we walked about a mile to this well that was about a mile from her home, and we collected water together. And I talked to her about, everything. We had quite a bit of time to talk. And when I got to the topic of what she was going to do with her life, and would she continue to live in her village, she smiled and said, no, I'm not going to live here. I'm going to move to the big city. I'm going to Lusaka, and I'm going to become a nurse. And I just really connected with her because I remembered being 14 and saying to Ben Affleck, we're going to move to the big city of New York and become actors. And I remember what that feeling was and what that age was like, and that kind of world of possibility that's laid out in front of you. And as I drove away, I was struck by the fact that had someone not had the foresight to sink this bore well a mile from her home, this girl would not be in school. She would be spending her entire day scavenging for water for her family. And she wouldn't be dreaming about moving to the big city and someday contributing to the economic engine of Zambia. In fact, she'd just be in this death spiral of poverty where she was scavenging for water and trying to survive from one day to the next. And so leaving aside the really horrible, horrifying death, every 90 seconds a child dies because they lack access to clean water or sanitation. Leaving that giant issue aside, there's this whole other issue of what kind of life somebody can expect if they don't have access to water versus what kind of life they can expect if they do have access to clean water and sanitation. So I think when we think of, 3.5 million people that we want to reach together, those are 3.5 million of those very stories, because that's a story you see repeated over and over again. I remember we were in Haiti together probably 5 or 6 years ago, and a little girl, I asked her, how this water system that had been put in her village was going to change her life. She had been spending 4 hours a day collecting water. And I said, is this going to give you more time to study? And she looked at me. She was 13 years old, and she looked at me and said, you know, I don't need more time to study. I'm the smartest girl in my class. And the way she said it, I knew she was telling me the truth, you know. And so I said, well, then what are you going to do, hotshot, with all this extra time? And she looked me right in the eyes, and she said, I'm going to play. And it really got to me, because I had a 13-year-old at the time, and just this idea that she hadn't been afforded the childhood right to play because she'd been so busy scavenging for water, and now this was going to give her that opportunity. So there's, you know, so hopefully, you know, by 2020 we'll create through Stella 3.5 more million of those stories, and that's a big deal for us.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let's take the last, please, a short question, because we're already running over time.
Sure. My name is Farah Bouchourak. I work for France 24. Just a really quick question, an observation, really. When I saw Stella Artois with waters.org, I thought it's greenwashing. I was wondering why a company like yours, who uses so much water, there's so much waste to make beer. So why did you get involved, and how far actually are you planning to be involved? And I'm sorry if you think it's free.
Please don't suggest that companies should stop making beer, just selfishly. Please don't ever make
selfishness
that.
Again, and
I think it's a great question, and thanks for questioning. Actually, water is a great part in terms of our footprint. We take very good care of water. We have some very important global commitments. We've been decreasing the usage of water by 50% in the last 5 years. And we are in this process of exactly defining the new goals for the following years. Especially I'm in Africa. We used to 3.4 liters of water for each liter of beer. We want to reduce by next year to 3.2, which is already a very good progress. I think this is part of some other points that are being discussed here about all the companies trying to reduce their water footprint. And I would say that it's not only in our facilities, but also in our clients, educating the people who work with beverages and beer in restaurants and bars, to make sure that they treat water very well. I mean, there's lots of learnings and educational panels and efforts that we do in that effort. So this is something big for us. I mean, as you said, every time we build a new brewery, we have to make sure that we have access to excellent water. So that's exactly why we are here, and that's exactly why Stella Artois is here. I think that we have the power to dream, right? So we are pretty confident that we are going to reach to this 3.5 million of these great stories that we've heard here today. I think they're quite inspiring. And I'm really very happy for being part of this, for representing a company that is part of this. And I mean, we talk about 600 million. We are aiming for 3.5 million in 3 to 4 years. Perhaps we could double this if we could get more 50 companies, 100 companies doing the same things. For definitely, we know that there are, in many different categories, brands that could be part of that effort, join forces with us. We could solve this problem, right? And that's what you're here for. We are not here just to be a drop in an ocean, but really a constant force and drive for changing this for good. Right.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you to all the panelists here today. Thank you for joining us. Go and write stories about this, because it is important, and there is still awareness to be raised. There's still more to be done. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.